My former spouse left me for someone she deemed better. He cheated on her. She ended up with nothing, and now they're begging for help as I make more than $500,000 a year. I clearly remember the precise instant when Sarah chose to dissolve our union. She was positioned at the kitchen table, casually browsing her device. I'd just arrived home from the office, ready to drop my satchel and relax, when she looked up and casually announced, "Alex, I want to dissolve our union." There was no introduction, no softening the blow, just a blunt, icy statement delivered like she was commenting on the weather. I hesitated for a second, unsure if I'd heard right. "Excuse me?" I inquired, my voice even despite the turmoil building within. "I said I want to dissolve our union," she repeated, her tone implying I was too dull to catch at the first go. I ought to have been enraged, maybe even devastated. Instead, I was shocked by her choice to separate after everything we'd shared, and the explanation she offered struck me the deepest. "I can't keep going like this," she declared, crossing her arms, "not making progress." I felt like laughing, but I held back. For years, I developed my profession from the ground up, generating a significant salary and creating a future many could only imagine, but Sarah never asked about my job. She displayed no interest in how I provided for us. I guess she figured I was just surviving, hardly getting by. I rested against the countertop, watching her. She seemed so assured, so convinced she was doing the right thing. "All right," I replied evenly, setting my satchel aside. She cocked her head, taken aback. "All right, yes, Sarah. If you wish to dissolve our union, I won't block you." I noticed a flash of discomfort on her face, but it was swiftly concealed by the arrogant, confident look I'd become accustomed to. "Good, because I've already spoken to an attorney. You'll have to move out by month's end, leave my home." Her boldness was nearly comical, but I didn't dispute it. If she wanted me out, I'd go for the time being. "Fine," I stated, turning to go upstairs. I sensed her gaze on me, anticipating I'd yell, beg, or debate, but I offered nothing. In the seclusion of our sleeping quarters, I perched on the mattress edge, absorbing the circumstances. This wasn't merely about separation. It was about power. Sarah desired to feel superior, to portray me as the loser in our partnership. Maybe she believed she could goad me into battling for her, pleading to regain her affection. But she didn't understand me as thoroughly as she assumed. The following days were a display of indirect hostility. Sarah abruptly had views on all matters. How I arranged clothes, how I passed my nights. She ridiculed my hobbies, routines, and even my coffee-making method. It was like she was attempting to validate her decision by depicting me as the antagonist. Then there was Marcus, my alleged closest companion. Initially, I didn't spot how frequently she brought up his name. Marcus mentioned this, or Marcus advised that, but it rapidly became evident he was more than a pal. I didn't challenge her. I wasn't prepared to reveal my strategy. Instead, I allowed her to assume she was in command. I permitted her to think I was the unaware, inactive spouse who couldn't perceive what was occurring right in front of him. One night, as I packed a valise with necessities, Sarah reclined against the doorway, arms folded, a grin on her face. "So, have you figured out your lodging?" she questioned, her manner condescending. I sealed the bag and faced her. "Don't concern yourself with me, Sarah. I'll cope," she snorted, obviously irritated by my composure. "Good, because Marcus and I are organizing a supper gathering here next weekend. It'd be uncomfortable if you were still around." A supper gathering, in my residence with my closest companion, the audacity was almost admirable. "Don't fret," I reassured her, lifting the bag. "I'll be far away by then." As I passed her, I observed her arrogant expression, believing she'd succeeded, thinking I was withdrawing in loss. But Sarah didn't comprehend that she'd just provided me the trigger to light the fuse. If she aimed to ruin everything, I'd permit it, and then I'd observe the fire consume both her and Marcus. Occasionally, the finest retribution isn't noisy or aggressive, it's subtle. It demands endurance. It's allowing the other individual to excavate their own pit while you silently ready to inter them in it. And believe me, I was only starting. Deception is a stealthy toxin. It doesn't proclaim itself with pomp or display. No, it sneaks in quietly, disguised as everyday chats and harmless actions, until one day you recognize that all you believed was firm has been worn away. Sarah's request for separation was the initial crack. What ensued was a steady dismantling of what I thought I knew about her and Marcus. Yes, Marcus, my presumed best pal, or at least the guy who'd occupied that role for years. I should have anticipated it, but retrospect is harsh. At the outset, it was understated. Sarah began referencing Marcus's name more than typical. Marcus stated this, or Marcus suggested that she'd offhandedly insert during meals. I'd acknowledge, not pondering much. After all, he was a near friend to us both. But as time went on, his name appeared in our discussions with growing regularity and with an affection that twisted my stomach. The first genuine alert came on a weekend afternoon. Sarah had just come back from one of her outings with Marcus. She was giggling, her face reddened in a manner I hadn't witnessed in ages. When I inquired what was so amusing, she dismissed me with, "Just something Marcus said, you wouldn't get it." I wouldn't get it. When had I turned into an outsider in our partnership? The response, I understood, arrived much sooner than I'd admit. I started observing more. She'd compose messages with a sly grin before swiftly securing her device. She'd attire herself more meticulously when she had arrangements with Marcus, rejecting it as merely friends or charging me with overthinking. Overthinking, that's the preferred term of anyone culpable attempting to redirect the fault. Still, I didn't face her. What would have been the purpose? She'd only refute it and distort the account to make me appear like the suspicious spouse who couldn't manage her having male acquaintances. So I let her think I was unaware, too engrossed in my own issues to detect her existence disintegrating. The ultimate strike came when Marcus appeared at my residence without notice. I was gathering my belongings into luggage, as Sarah had so graciously demanded when the bell sounded. I opened it to discover Marcus's perpetually assured smile. He entered without awaiting an invite. "Alex, buddy," he said, as if we were still top friends. "How's it hanging?" I gazed at him, every ounce of tolerance in me challenged. "What do you need, Marcus?" I asked, maintaining my voice steady. He rested against the barrier at ease and charismatic. "Just dropping by. Sarah noted you were relocating, and I figured I'd offer assistance." Assistance from the man who was essentially entering my existence. The nerve was nearly astonishing. "I've handled it," I said briefly, continuing my gathering. Marcus stayed, and when I looked over, I saw the wheels spinning in his mind. He wasn't merely dropping by, he was there to assert his territory. "Look," he began, his manner adopting what he probably considered genuineness. "I know this must be hard for you, but events occur." "Events occur," I echoed, turning to confront him directly. I took a purposeful stride ahead, compelling him to lock eyes. "Yeah, Marcus, events do occur, and sometimes they return to torment you." He stumbled for the initial time. The arrogant smile diminished, substituted by something akin to doubt. I didn't allow him to regroup. I returned to my valise, disregarding him. "You've always been a solid guy, Alex," he said anxiously before moving to the exit. "No grudges, right?" I didn't answer. Quietness is a potent tool, particularly when someone yearns for a response. Marcus departed without further comment, and as his vehicle drove off, I released a breath I hadn't known I'd been retaining. That evening, as I reclined in the bed that would shortly no longer be mine, I reviewed the prior months, overlooked indicators, deceptions, and disloyalty. I could have stormed, challenged them both, required explanations. But what would that have accomplished? They'd already dismissed me as unimportant, a simple annotation in their tale. What they didn't grasp was that I wasn't the inactive, clueless spouse they imagined. I'd been observing, recording mental observations, and plotting my subsequent actions. If Sarah and Marcus thought they could dance into the horizon together without repercussions, they were due for a harsh realization. Because disloyalty doesn't conclude when the facts emerge. No, that's when the actual contest starts. And as far as I was involved, this was a contest I completely planned to triumph. Separation, it's a brief term for something so disorderly. It implies finality, a tidy conclusion to a complicated narrative. But when Sarah and I entered that legal chamber, I knew this wasn't the finish. For her, it was a triumph circuit, a festivity of what she viewed as an improvement. She showed up attired to dazzle in a fitted ensemble that exuded elegance and a assured grin that churned my gut. Marcus wasn't distant, hovering like a phantom. He didn't step into the chamber, naturally, he wouldn't risk it. But his existence alone informed me all I required to know. Sarah wasn't just separating from me. She was displaying her disloyalty. "Alex, let's not drag this out," she pressed as we positioned across from one another at the discussion table. "I don't want this to be more difficult than required." More difficult than required. The sarcasm wasn't overlooked by me. She had already rendered things challenging by stomping on years of matrimony as if it were a tattered rug she couldn't wait to exchange. "I don't plan to," I said serenely, holding her stare without faltering. The attorney detailed the conditions. She desired the residence, certain furnishings, and a portion of what she believed were my humble reserves. She probably anticipated I'd resist, perhaps even plead for a superior arrangement, but I didn't blink. I consented to every condition, endorsing each document without pause. Sarah regarded me perplexed. "You're okay with all this?" "Why not?" I questioned, maintaining my manner casual. "It's just possessions, Sarah, you can take them." I detected a trace of uncertainty in her look, but she promptly concealed it with an arrogant smile. She believed she'd prevailed, that she was departing with all that counted. What she didn't know was that the residence wasn't mine initially. It was a lease in my name, utilized as a work area when I began independent work years prior. And the reserves she thought she was obtaining were merely a segment of my true assets. The actual funds were stored in ventures, profiles she had no idea were present. As the documents were endorsed and the procedure wrapped up, Sarah reclined in her seat, content. "Well, I'm pleased we could manage this responsibly," she stated patronizingly. I simply nodded, fighting the impulse to chuckle. A week afterward, I collected my items and departed the residence she so eagerly desired. I granted her all she asked for: furnishings, decorations, even the costly kitchen devices she'd never employed. It wasn't valuable to battle for any of it. Let her possess her rewards. Marcus, naturally, squandered no time settling in. A local resident forwarded me an image of him unloading containers into the residence, with Sarah positioned on the veranda, displaying that identical arrogant look. They likely thought they were constructing the ideal small existence together, utterly unaware of the tempest forming just outside their view. What Sarah didn't know was that I had been amassing proof of her liaison with Marcus for months prior to the separation. Images, communications, even a location record displaying their regular midday meetings at a local inn. And while I could have utilized it to complicate the separation, I opted not to. Why? Because prolonging it in legal proceedings would only lengthen the turmoil, and I desired something much more gratifying. I wanted fate to follow its path, and I wanted a prime view when it did. In the weeks that ensued, I adapted to my fresh existence. My profession kept prospering, and my earnings increased further as novel prospects arose. Meanwhile, Sarah and Marcus were exhibiting their romance throughout the area, persuaded they were the model of joy. I didn't respond, I didn't contact, I didn't message. My quiet was overwhelming, and I knew it would erode them eventually. One day, a shared acquaintance messaged me. "Alex, did you hear? Sarah's hosting a welcome event. She and Marcus are really embracing this whole affair." I smiled to myself. Of course they were. Sarah flourished on others' approval, nourishing off the mirage of achievement. She had no notion her gleaming new existence was constructed on a base of falsehoods, and that base was already fracturing. As I sat in my new dwelling that night, staring at the urban horizon, I couldn't help but feel tranquil. Sarah thought she had triumphed, but she had no idea what she had genuinely forfeited. And as Marcus was about to discover, seizing something that wasn't his carried a cost. I wasn't rushing. Retribution, after all, is optimally delivered chilled, and I was merely commencing. I'm not certain what Sarah anticipated when she and Marcus formalized their bond. Perhaps she pictured an impeccable existence packed with relaxed meals, affectionate getaways, and the excitement of a novel romance. If so, she was due for a severe shock. It didn't take long for fissures to emerge. Naturally, I remained mute. There was no necessity to meddle. They were excavating their own pits quite adequately without my aid. The initial indication of issues came from murmurs among shared friends. A companion remarked that Sarah and Marcus were already finding it hard to sustain their dream existence. "She's arranging all these supper events to flaunt," my friend observed. "But I hear Marcus has been extravagant and they're lagging on bills." I wasn't astonished. Marcus was always the sort who prized the way of life over the labor. He adored pricey attire, showy vehicles, and upscale eating, but he lacked the restraint or salary to maintain it. Sarah evidently hadn't realized she'd exchanged economic safety for a charmer with scant content. Then came the gossip about their disputes. They weren't the flawless duo everyone assumed. Folks discussed yelling bouts overheard through the barriers of their leased home. Yes, leased. The residence Sarah had been so proud to secure in the separation was vanished. She'd been compelled to dispose of it because she couldn't manage the maintenance. One day, an former local called. "Alex, you won't believe this," she said, scarcely holding her mirth. "Sarah and Marcus had the property owner banging on their entrance this morning. They're delinquent on rent." I reclined in my seat, a smile expanding across my face. "How delinquent?" 3 months, she answered. "They're pretending it's minor, but you can tell they're floundering." It was nearly artistic. Her cherished residence, battled for so intensely, was now a lease they couldn't cover. Meanwhile, I concentrated on my own existence. My earnings had escalated after the separation, and I was more occupied than ever with fresh initiatives and prospects. I immersed myself in my labor, constructing something authentic and enduring, while Sarah and Marcus stumbled in their empty romance. Then, unexpectedly, Sarah contacted me. She messaged one night, pretending amicability. "Hi, Alex, I hope you're all right. Just wanted to see how things are." I gazed at the note, detecting the urgency below her terms. She wasn't seeing, she was investigating. Still, I engaged. "Things are excellent, Sarah," I responded. "Work is booming. How about you?" Her reply arrived swiftly. "You know, Marcus and I are coping, just surviving on a limited budget." I almost chuckled. Coping was kind. The genuine strike came a week afterward. I was departing a customer session when I noticed Sarah lingering outside the structure. She appeared exhausted, fatigued, worried, and much less refined than previously. "Alex," she said, her voice infused with something I hadn't heard from her in years, insecurity. I neared, keeping my look impartial. "Sarah, what brings you here?" She paused, toying with her bag handle. "I, wanted to chat. Things have been difficult lately, and I thought maybe we could reconnect." Reconnect. I knew precisely what she desired, but I wasn't going to simplify it. "I'm somewhat occupied," I said, "but I hope things resolve for you." She compelled a grin, but I could see the fractures underneath. As I departed, I couldn't help but experience a silent contentment. This was fate at its best. Sarah and Marcus thought they'd advanced, but they hadn't understood the expense of their decisions. Now they were ensnared in an existence they couldn't uphold, striving to maintain facades as the barriers closed in. The greatest aspect: I didn't have to do anything. They'd done this to themselves, and I was satisfied to observe from afar as they harvested what they'd planted. Their ideal small world was disintegrating, and I hadn't even initiated my retribution. The aspect about payback is that it doesn't always need to be boisterous. Sometimes the most delightful wins are hushed. Just live your reality, and the outcomes will express themselves. That's precisely what I did. I was prospering while Sarah and Marcus's meticulously built mirage of prosperity collapsed as they hurried to uphold appearances. My profession had risen in ways I hadn't foreseen. Agreements were finalizing everywhere, and my yearly earnings had risen to over $533,000. I wasn't just succeeding, I was thriving. But I kept it concealed. There was no need to display my accomplishment. Sarah had already rejected me as the uninspired man, and I was content to let her think that. Why rectify her when her unawareness benefited me so effectively? Instead of fixating on them, I turned inward. I enhanced my dwelling to a stylish, contemporary area in the city's center, mirroring my new existence. Tall windows, advanced gadgets, and a breathtaking view of the horizon. It was a home created by my own endeavors, devoid of the resentment and disloyalty that had spoiled the previous one. My days were packed with sessions, tasks, and chances that kept me involved and invigorated. My evenings were mine. I began mingling more, re-establishing ties with former pals and encountering new ones. Life felt brighter, more expansive, brimming with potentials. Of course, Sarah wasn't completely absent. Occasionally, I'd receive a message or learn from shared friends about her and Marcus's recent difficulties, unsettled accounts, quarrels, accumulating obligations. Evidently, they attempted organizing a supper event at their lease, only to have the electricity disconnected midway because they hadn't settled the service bill. "Alex," a friend said, chuckling, "you should have witnessed it." Sarah was mortified, and Marcus attempted to dismiss it as an error, but everyone knew the facts. I didn't chuckle, though. I just acknowledged, allowing the contentment to flow over me. This wasn't about boasting or emphasizing their failures. It was about equity. They had tilted the balance with their disloyalty, and now existence was equilibrating them. One day, I encountered Marcus at a cafe. He appeared drained, his once refined look replaced by something unkempt. He didn't spot me initially, giving me a chance to watch. He bent over his computer, forehead creased, browsing what seemed like employment ads. When he eventually looked up and saw me, his look changed. No arrogance, no swagger, just a touch of shame. "Alex," he said, rising clumsily. "Marcus," I answered calmly. "How's it?" He wavered, his gaze shifting as if hunting an exit. "Good, just occupied with such tasks, huh?" I inquired, lifting an eyebrow. "Good to learn." He chuckled uneasily, but his eyes didn't align. "Yeah, staying active." "You know the drill?" I just acknowledged, letting the quiet persist. He moved uncomfortably before muttering something about returning to his duties and hastily departed. That meeting revealed all I needed. Marcus was floundering, and Sarah's ideal new existence wasn't so ideal. Sarah's messages grew more regular over the ensuing weeks. They began ambiguous, just inquiring or sending good wishes. But I knew what they truly signified. She was probing the waters, checking if I'd be open to rescuing her. I disregarded most. The few I answered were brief and courteous, providing her scant to utilize. Her notes soon became more straightforward. "Alex, I know we've had our disagreements, but I could really use a companion now." A companion? The sarcasm wasn't overlooked by me. She had tossed me aside like old refuse, but now that her gleaming new existence was collapsing, she wanted a rescue. I didn't answer, not from malice, but because I owed her zilch. Sarah had made her decisions, and she was dealing with them now. My quiet conveyed everything. While she and Marcus fought to remain above water, I ascended. Chances continued arriving. My ventures were prospering. My existence was filled with serenity and intent. I didn't need to challenge Sarah or Marcus. I didn't need to shout, blame, or require regrets. My accomplishment, my joy, was my payback, and the finest part, they recognized it. They sensed it in every unreturned message, every gossip about my success, and every meeting where I departed with dignity while they hurried to gather the fragments. It wasn't merely about equalization. It was about demonstrating to myself that I could transcend it all. And I had, silently, assuredly, and totally. Sarah and Marcus's decline wasn't a spectacular blast. It was a gradual, deteriorating catastrophe of their own creation. I observed it develop from afar, hearing bits from shared friends and viewing sporadic online updates. Each fresh report depicted a sharper image. They were sinking in their own conceit, and the wave was ascending rapidly. Initially, Sarah tried to uphold facades. She continued sharing images of her and Marcus at upscale eateries, journeys that appeared much more luxurious than they were, and peaks of their flawless existence. But the fractures were evident. Meals became rarer, holidays vanished, and the grins in their images looked strained. Then came the murmurs. Individuals noticed Sarah wasn't as refined as before. Her once impeccable style and luxury garments were substituted by budget options. Marcus, the always extravagant performer, was now reusing ensembles he'd scarcely donned before. It wasn't long before the murmurs turned into explicit accounts. One day, a shared friend phoned with the update. "Alex, you'll appreciate this," she said, barely restraining her mirth. "Sarah and Marcus are in serious issues. Apparently they're months delinquent on rent." I lifted an eyebrow, curious but not stunned. "Rent? I thought they possessed that residence." "Not even near," she responded. "They've been leasing it all along, and rumor is they're facing removal." I emitted a slight chuckle. It was poetic equity. Sarah had struggled so fiercely for that residence in the separation, only to learn she couldn't afford to retain it. The economic woes didn't halt there. Another friend noted Marcus had been dismissed from his position. He was still feigning all was well, but it was obvious he was faltering. Sarah, for all her grievances about my supposed lack of drive, had never maintained a genuine occupation. Their flawless existence was crumbling under the burden of rising debt and no revenue. One night as I drank coffee and browsed correspondence, Sarah messaged me. "Alex, I really need to speak with you, it's crucial." I stared at the note briefly before replying. "Is all okay?" Her answer came nearly immediately. "Not truly. Marcus and I are enduring a difficult period, and I hoped you could assist, just a minor loan to tide us over." A loan from me. I couldn't help but chuckle at the sarcasm. She'd abandoned me, ridiculed me, and paraded her new bond with Marcus, and now she wanted my aid. "I'm sorry to learn that," I answered, "but I can't assist. I'm certain you'll resolve it." Her reply was delayed this time, and I could almost feel her irritation through the display. "Alex, please, just this once. You don't have to exaggerate it." I didn't trouble answering. There was nothing remaining to express. Sarah and Marcus had prepared their bed, and now they were resting in it. The subsequent update arrived a week later. Sarah and Marcus had been formally removed. The property owner, weary of their justifications, had issued them a strict cutoff they missed. They were forced to relocate to a tiny, dilapidated unit on the town's outskirts. "Alex, I wish you could view it," the same shared friend said over the line. "It's a long way from the existence they pretended to possess. Sarah's scarcely managing, and Marcus appears to have aged years." I didn't boast. I didn't need to. Their decline wasn't my action. It was the outcome of their own decisions. Sarah had traded an existence of steadiness and backing for a dream that couldn't endure actuality. And Marcus, well, he was harvesting what he'd planted. But the most revealing instant came during another random meeting. I bumped into Sarah at a market, her cart loaded with basic generics. She looked up, spotted me, and stiffened. "Alex," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "Sarah," I responded, keeping my tone balanced. She parted her lips as if to talk, but no words emerged. She appeared beaten. The assured, haughty woman who had demanded separation and paraded her liaison was absent. "I hope you're managing all right," I said, shattering the quiet. She nodded rapidly, her gaze averting. "You too," she whispered, pushing her cart along the path. As I watched her depart, I couldn't help but sense an odd blend of feelings. Contentment, yes, but also a hint of sorrow. Sarah had made her decisions, and they'd guided her here. This was the existence she'd battled so hard to construct, and now she was confined in it. I didn't need to utter or perform anything to make her rue her actions. Life had already handled that for me. And as I exited the store that day, I realized fate doesn't always require a push. It just needs time. All reached a climax soon enough. I knew it was approaching, it was unavoidable. Individuals like Sarah and Marcus don't manage repercussions well. When their meticulously built facade of wealth begins to fall, they react harshly, seeking someone to fault or someone to save them. One morning, as I concluded a customer discussion, my phone illuminated with an unknown number, but I identified it. Sarah. For an instant, I contemplated sending it to voicemail, but interest prevailed. I picked up, maintaining my tone neutral. "Alex here." Her voice was strained, on the edge of fracturing. "Alex, we must discuss," I exhaled, reclining in my seat. "About what, Sarah?" There was a break, as if she was hunting for the correct terms. About Marcus, about us." I lifted an eyebrow, though she couldn't observe. "Us, the boldness of this lady." "Sarah, there is no us. That concluded the day you presented me separation documents. What's this actually about?" She wavered again, her voice mellowing. "We're floundering, Alex. Things haven't been simple since all transpired. I thought perhaps we could converse, maybe you could offer aid." Offer aid. There it was, the true motive she contacted. "Aid with what?" I inquired, pretending unawareness. "Monetarily," she confessed, her tone laced with compelled modesty. "Just a loan to get us stable." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Sarah, you abandoned me because you thought I wasn't sufficient, that I didn't labor hard enough or generate enough for you. And now you want me to repair the chaos you created." Her voice stiffened, protectiveness seeping in. "You don't understand. Marcus and I just encountered a difficult phase." "A difficult phase," I interrupted her. "Sarah, you made your selection. You left me for Marcus, believing he was the superior option. How's that functioning for you?" "No way." She began to object, but I stopped her. "You desired independence, Sarah, independence from me, from my alleged lack of drive. So relish that independence. I'm not your backup." I disconnected before she could reply. The next meeting wasn't via phone, it was face-to-face. A week later, Sarah appeared at my workplace without warning. She looked disheveled, her once refined appearance substituted by something far more urgent. "Alex," she declared, bursting into my space despite my aide's efforts to halt her. "We need to converse." I reclined in my seat, arms crossed. "You've got 2 minutes, be fast." She dove into a tirade about how challenging things had been for her and Marcus, how the world had been unjust, and how she was only requesting a minor favor. "Sarah," I interjected, "you made your choices. You left me for Marcus, thinking you were enhancing your life. How's that progressing for you?" Her face reddened with fury and embarrassment. "Alex, I know I wounded you, but you don't have to be so merciless. I thought you were superior to this." "Superior to this?" I chuckled. "You thought I was a loser, Sarah. You thought I wasn't enough. Now you're here pleading for aid because your flawless life isn't so flawless after all. I owe you nothing, that's it. So, what are your views on this tale? Do you concur with the events, or do you perceive it otherwise? Share your opinion in the comments. We'd adore hearing from you. And if you like the video, be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss our future talies. See you in the next one.